I'd like to call this board meeting to order. I'd like to begin by asking Mr. Etheridge if he'd lead us in our pledge, please.
Heavenly Father, thank you for this day and the opportunity for us to come together to help guide and direct our school district. We ask that you put your healing hands upon the decisions and be your will and all the great things that are going on in this world, that you help guide and direct us and help set our school district in the direction you see fit. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Etheridge. We have Mr. Edison by remote, and we have Mr. Cowart on as well.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you. Mr. Cowart's here as well. Mr. Cowart, are you on?
Madam Chair, I do not see his name on the list, but also Natasha Mickens is our attorney, and she is online virtually.
Okay. All right.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you. Board members, do I hear a motion to adopt the agenda?
I move to adopt.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes to adopt our agenda. Thank you very much for everyone that's here today. I'm glad to see everyone and everyone that's with us remote. We are glad you are with us. Are there any public comments at the moment with it? I didn't receive any earlier, but I don't know if we have any. Oh, okay. All right. Is there anyone that would like to address the board that's here?
I have a follow-up question to.
Okay.
At our last meeting, we had a whole stack of submitted via the internet. Were those ever addressed? Those questions. Some were from employees wanting to know the process, and I didn't know if those were ever addressed. I saw the just the facts thing, and I didn't see those specifically in there, but I will readily admit I didn't. I breezed instead of hardcore studying those questions.
Okay. Mr. Edison. Mr. Edison.
I think I didn't address everything with the FAQ for both employees and the parents.
Yeah, I can't understand you, Mr. Edison.
I said I think it was addressed through the FAQ that Melissa Lewis sent out for parents and for the teachers.
Okay.
Now, it might have been, not have been, it's verbatim like some of the questions were, but we tried to get the gist of everything.
Okay.
We did publish a frequently asked question for families. There is a frequently asked question for staff, because the questions are obviously different about processes and things and responses, and that's in the works right now.
Okay, so the one for the staff has not come out
It
yet.
is different, yes, sir.
Okay. And will y'all send us a copy of that? Okay. Cool.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Edison.
Thank you.
All right. Item D, our proposed budget approval. Ms. Lake.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
All right. So today we're going to go over our proposed budget for the next fiscal year, or the fiscal year in 2021, and approve the trim ads. All right, so keep in mind this year we didn't have any of the following information for our budget workshops. So this will be the first time we've had any real budget information to share for this upcoming budget cycle. So please stop me and ask any questions as you have them. So first, looking at total state and local funding. So we're looking at the first part of your handout. The second calculation shows an increase on the second page. 200, and of course I didn't have my notes. 85,542 from the first calculation, which you don't have a copy of that. I apologize. What you're looking at is a comparison of the fourth and the second. However, the total state funding fell $68,000 because local funding increased $153,000. So this means that the increase, any increase we saw, that net increase of $85,000 is due to the fact that we're going to contribute more locally. None of that is real earth shattering, but let's back up a minute and go look at the handout that you do have. That is your fourth calculation versus your second calculation. So again, I was talking about the first calculation versus the second, which not a lot changes because it's just comparing the conference report to the second calculation. But now we're going to back up and look at what we did in 1920 compared to what we can expect in 2021. So there's a couple things. When comparing the FEFP we received in 1920 versus the expected FEFP for 2021, we see a net state increase, of $511,000. So that's on your second page. There are many areas of concern this budget cycle, and we'll go over many of those issues today. However, the first thing that jumps out is the teacher increase allocation that we're going to receive is more than the net increase. So we're going to receive $890,000 for a teacher increase, salary increase, but our net increase is only $511,000. Why? Well, some other allocations or categoricals were cut, with the most important being the digital classroom allocation. This line item took a hit of over $152,000, but the needs for this allocation have not disappeared. Only the funding has disappeared. Another huge concern are the family empowerment scholarships. We've lost over $250,000 in funding last year and are told to double that loss for this year. So let me talk just a minute about family empowerment scholarships. So the recently signed voucher law, House Bill 7067, has a provision that will authorize a rapid rise in family wealth levels qualified to receive these tax dollars, to receive these scholarships. The qualifying level of family income will continue to increase 25% per year when 5% or more of the authorized vouchers are not used in that year. For example, if the utilization rate in 2021 is not higher than the rate in 1920, the maximum annual income for a family of 4 qualifying for these scholarships implemented to help low-income students will rise 375% above the poverty level, over $98,000 per year. Last year, they did not use the maximum amount of scholarships. So we're reminded that there will be about 29,000 more family empowerment vouchers authorized in 2021. And in 1920, there were about 18,000 vouchers authorized, but only 14,000 were used. So in 2021, these vouchers will grow about 260%. So I'll kind of stop there. So that was a lot of numbers, but essentially we took a hit of 250,000. We are expecting over $500,000 lost in revenue this year to family empowerment scholarships, and it's the way that the bill is written to encourage the use of these vouchers.
Yeah, sorry. So we lost it because we didn't use it.
No, we lost it because kids left our school district on the scholarships. So
Gotcha.
as they continue to increase the scholarships, it's great for parents to have choice. I'm not arguing
Right.
that. I'm just telling you the math isn't so good if we can't keep the FTE in our district. It's suggested that when planning again the budget for 2021, we plan an increase in use of these vouchers based on trends and private school availability in our area. And again, in many areas, these vouchers could be used twice as much as in 2021. So the funds associated with these students are included in our FEFP. So they'll be included in my revenue estimate, but they just flow in and out of the district's bank accounts and leave no dollars behind for district expenses. So we have to come in, I think I have about almost $1 million in scholarship expenditures this year. 967,827 is what I have budgeted, and 500 of that is for family empowerment, and the other almost 500 is for McKay. So those are the two that we have to watch. All right.
Kim, can
Yes,
you hear me?
yes, I can.
Okay, I heard family empowerment. What was the second one on that?
McKay,
The McKay. Okay, I thought that's what it was, but I just wanted to verify. Thank you.
you're welcome. All right, so another issue that we're facing this year is FRS, so Florida Retirement System, retirement increase. It has increased from 8.47% on the employer side to 10%. That's a 1.53% increase. It's huge. So one way to think of this increase is we needed a base student allocation increase of $75 just to break even. We did not receive that. So what we're in fact facing is a $24 deficit per student just because of the FRS increase. This isn't factoring in loss to McKay, loss to family empowerment, any of that. So in a normal year, this could be devastating to our budget. All right, so now we're going to move on to I'm sorry, does anybody have any questions about that portion?
So each calculation as we start into school, because a lot of this is foresight, we'll have to adjust the budget comparable to who's attending our schools or not.
Yes, sir. So what we've been instructed by the superintendent at this point to do is to create a budget based on our estimated FTE that Morgan and I would have sent last January. And we will have to come up with contingency budgets or budget amendments as we move along and our FTE is reduced or proration occurs. And I'll get into that a little bit, but yes.
So for simplicity in my mind, if we just, I don't want to get off on the other, but if 10% left us going to virtual school, is that factored in?
No, not yet. No, sir. No, sir. Goodness, I can't figure out how to turn on this. Come on. Okay, so I gave you all an FLDOE handout. And this just talks a little bit about the teacher salary increase allocation, what we know, because I know there were questions, and we don't know a lot. But briefly, what we do know is our allocation is a little over $890,000. 80% of that is dedicated to increasing full-time classroom teachers' minimum base salary. And I do want to say a lot of this, or most of this information is subject to negotiations with the union. So I'm just going to briefly go over exactly what we've received from from Department of Education. The other 20% is dedicated to salary increases for those full-time classroom teachers who did not receive anything in the 80% or who received less than 2%. And then also for other full-time instructional personnel. I gave you all definitions from statute and just different things that you could look through to answer some more questions. But do you have any questions at this point? And this is all, I'm sorry, to go towards the goal of raising our base salary to $47,500. Another question we've been asked, these are sort of the implementation timeline. So we will be coming back before the board for an approval of our distribution plan after we meet with the union, and that will have to occur before October 1st because we'll have to submit that to DOE. And so you can see the different statutory deadlines that we have for this allocation. And these will be annually as long as the allocation is provided.
Kim,
Yes.
so on that allocation of 890, 414, we'll reduce that by the 32,000 that will go to the charter schools?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And are they under the same, because their plan will have to come back to us, correct?
Yes, sir. It'll be approved by their governing body, but I believe we will in turn then submit it along to DOE with ours.
Okay. So does that mean that we are the regulating authority to make sure that they follow the same statutory requirements?
I'm not sure. I do not believe so. Ms. Hires did not have to do that for Best and Brightest, correct?
Did not. They approve it at their site with their governing body, and then it just comes to us and we submit both of our plans to the board for approval.
Okay, thank you.
Not responsible for their regulations.
And I should point out, this is a concerted effort between the union and different departments within the school board. It's not just happening in one department. It takes personnel, finance, and the union to move us forward with this allocation plan.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
So this is based on year-to-year funding from the state to the district.
Yes, sir, but part of the statute does say that the school district has to be able to fund this plan. So that has me a little concerned on what that means moving forward. We cannot reduce the salary schedule. So if the funding went away, we would have to be able to support our schedule at what it was at that point. But it is supposed to be recurring.
My
funds.
question would be, is this allocation going in to our salaries and wages as a whole, or is this bill going to stand on its own forever to be added to the base of the salary?
Okay, if I understand you correctly, it's going to go into the base salary of our teachers. Yes, sir. And that'll be the new base that the allocations
Right, so
calculated
year
on
after year,
next
they don't
year.
have to have a bill added to it.
Yes,
That's all.
yes, yes.
That makes me nervous.
All right, so quickly, let's discuss TRIM, which is why we're here today, truth and millage, so you can approve the ads we need to run for our tentative budget. So here's a copy of our certified taxable value. It looks like this. Line 16 is our RLE, or required local effort, of 3.739. Line 17 shows 1.5 for capital outlay and 0.748 for discretionary operating. There were no changes to either one of those. You'll notice that our required local effort is lower this year when compared to our prior year, which is line 9, but it's higher than line 14, which is the state's rollback rate. So we will be advertising for a tax increase this year. So what's a rollback rate? That's the rate that would generate the same amount of property tax revenues as approved for the prior year. When the tax base increases like this year, the rollback rate is less than the prior year's rate. So this just simply means that the tax value has increased, so we're receiving more in local taxes when compared to last year, but the local tax rate has not increased. But therefore, we do have to advertise a notice of tax increase. Does anybody have any questions about that?
Ms. Lakin, that's maybe a hard question, but that difference between the two, can you tell us what that generates?
I would have to look at last year's. It wasn't a lot.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, so let's move to the budget narrative and look at each fund as it applies to this proposed or tentative budget, and that would be this packet here. So a couple things. It's important for everyone to remember that the expenditures being planned are based on revenue forecasts, not money in our bank or in the bank. If unusual events disrupt the economy, these forecasts are likely, less likely to be accurately described in future reality. This is why budget numbers change regularly and why the budget is a process and not a document. If the economic disruption caused by the virus continues to be as severe as we saw in April and in May, the legislature will have to meet and create a new reduced budget, which will lead to what we were talking about. As of now, we have heard they will not do that until after the November elections, which could have a catastrophic impact on the second half of the school year. Another huge issue we're monitoring is enrollment. So we're facing a huge mid-year budget cut in two ways, something called proration and of course a reduction in FTE or enrollment. Proration is when the state reduces our budget to keep the state budget balanced, which is written in there in the state of Florida's Constitution. So it's not necessarily because we've seen reduced enrollment. It would be because they've received reduced revenues. And we think this is a real possibility due to the anticipated loss in sales tax revenue. Another way we lose funding is when we have a reduction in FTE or enrollment when compared to our forecast. Keep in mind, the forecast that we did was for this fiscal year was done in January and would not accurately reflect any impact from COVID. We are monitoring this loss, and we are all concerned. But we have to move forward with developing, a budget to the best of our ability with all of these foreseen and unforeseen circumstances or issues. And it makes it very difficult to accurately calculate. So let's walk through each of these funds with regard to our proposed and tentative budget. Does anybody have any questions before we move forward? Okay, so the first one we're looking at is our general fund. And we will be estimating state revenues of almost 34.6 million for 47.2 million in revenues, total revenues. We're looking at expenditures of a little over 48,000. Now, these expenditures will include assigned fund balances. So when the schools have their own schoolhouse budget, when they don't spend all their money in one year, it rolls into what we call an assigned fund balance for use of the prior year. So it's not actually taking money out of the current year's budget, but I need to budget it so that it's there for them to use. So it's coming from this assigned fund balance. So that's why you're seeing our expenditures exceed our revenues. And then what you're looking at the very bottom is just a guess or a good estimate, I guess I should say, for where we think we will end at the end of 2021 in terms of assigned, restricted, and ending fund balance.
And that's designed on the best guess to keep a 5% condition.
Yes, sir.
Financial condition ratio.
Yes, sir. All right, so the next two pages you're looking at are our debt service, our COPS, our certificates of participation, and our racetrack revenue. After that, we're looking at our capital projects.
Ms. Lake,
Yes, sir.
on the debt service, and looking at those, is there any chance to go back, and what's the procedure for refunding those and going back out to bond and trying to get a lower interest rate with interest rates closing, or lowering, I should say?
I believe the racetrack is something we do through the state, so I'm not sure how that would work. But in terms of the COPS, I believe they're refunded every 10 years. And I know when I started this position in 2016, I was told they were just done to help with building Williston Middle High. So I don't believe we can do it again until 2025 or 2026.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, going to the capital projects budget. This has jumped way up, and we all know there's a reason for that. So not a real huge cause for concern. But of the revenue you're seeing an offset of what we should receive in year one for special facilities for the building Chiefland Middle High School, a little over 12 million. And then you'll see matching expenditures going out to match that project. I'm not sure that it'll flow that way, but this is, I believe, how we need to budget it. All right, so the next page is your federal food service budget. Food service has had an interesting issue this year. They're pulling in more than we're spending, which sounds great, but they can only hold a fund balance of a certain percentage. So Pam is working with Julia, and we're trying to figure out whether we need to start charging them like we charge our other federal budgets or what we can do. But if we exceed that fund balance percent, the state comes back, or the Department of Ag will come back for it. And I know Miss Julia had planned expenditures that she was going to spend this year and got waylaid with COVID coming in mid-year. So we're working with her on that, but it's a good problem to have, right? You know, so we're not giving money from the general fund to food service, but possibly food service could give money to the general fund, and we are exploring that. Next is the federal budget comparison. So this would be where your Title I, Title II, all of those are, and revenues will always match expenditures here. But it's a little over 4.7 million in federal budgets, or federal dollars. So, and this does not include the CARES Act. I don't have that information yet, so it's actually probably a little bit more. Finally is self-insurance budget comparison. So what we're looking at is revenues of 6.2 and then almost 6.2 going out in expenditures. And this would be where we have our employee benefits, health benefits. I also did a breakdown by object so you could kind of see where the money is going. This is general fund only. So you're seeing we're still spending almost 60% of our revenues are going for employee salaries, almost 20% for employee benefits, followed up by purchase services. So those would be contracted work, material supplies, energy services, capital outlay, and other expenditures. It doesn't change a lot, but it's always good to see it just to make sure that we're still spending our money where we should be spending our money. And then the last few pages is just a budget, a narrative of what I just discussed. You can review at your own pace. Anybody have any questions for me? All right, so we'll go through the ads that I have.
Did we get a copy of that pie in our?
No, ma'am, it was, I can print that out for you. I'll forward it to you. It's just part of my presentation.
Like,
Yes, ma'am.
how much did we lose again in digital classroom funding?
Over 150,000.
And can the CARES Act help us with any of that?
The CARES Act is actually helping with some, but we were gifted, Morgan's not in here, Chromebooks from the state, and it was a great gift. But then if something happened to them, we need to be able to insure them so that we can have them fixed. We don't have enough staff to fix all these new Chromebooks that flooded in, and I think they only have a 5-year lifespan too. So we're using the CARES Act to buy insurance for these Chromebooks. We are using the CARES Act for Canvas for 2 years, and I'm not sure if there's any other digital stuff, but that's helping. But this is how we purchase our Chromebooks, and I think Morgan feels semi-okay for the next couple years, but this is going to pose an issue probably 2 years down the road at least. All right, so this is the notice of proposed tax increase that we discussed earlier. I do want to say, usually when I bring these ads to the board, they have been blessed by Department of Revenue. I sent them to the Department of Revenue 4:30 on Friday, emailed them again, and I think they're just like the rest of us. They have not blessed my ads. So these ads have been created to the best of my ability. I will not be publishing them, giving them to the newspapers until tomorrow and the end of the week. And I'm hoping to have Department of Revenue's blessing too by then, just to make sure I've got all my numbers correct and in the right places. If not, we will have to do this again. And I don't want to have to do that. So this is the notice of proposed tax increase. The A, B, and C numbers actually come from the DR 420, which is what I had given you earlier, came from last year's and this year's. And then it just shows how much we have to give in order to receive that 28.5 million in FEFP dollars from the state. And then it shows that this is an increase. And then it tells the public where this meeting will be held, time and location. And again, I think we'd already discussed this, but you'll see these ads are going to go through the Gainesville Sun next Wednesday to meet statute deadline. And then on Thursday, they'll go through our local papers. Next, we have our notice of tax for school capital outlay. Here's where we have to let the public know how we will be spending that 1.5 mil. And these are the same categories that we've had in years past. The only difference is we do have to notice that it is a tax increase. And finally, this is the budget summary of everything that we just discussed. And I do want to point out that it says that we are 21% more, our expenditures coming up are 21% more than last year's. That is due to capital outlay. That is mostly due to that special facilities funding, not a huge increase in the general fund. So does anyone have any questions for me?
Do I hear a motion to approve the advertisements?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so I have a motion to approve the notice of proposed tax increase, the notice of tax for school capital outlay, and a budget summary ad. Is there any other discussion?
I have one question. Ms. Lake, under capital projects, the 16.3 million,
Yes, sir.
that's in excess of what we're receiving for the state for the Chiefland project. So
Because it's our own capital dollars too, and that would also include some of those non-LCIF funds. So for example, we're building the warehouse,
okay,
so it includes all of that.
local funding.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Lake,
Yes.
so question on that. On the notice of tax for school capital outlay, do those projects need to be listed?
Well, the projects that are using LCIF funds are being listed. The projects that are using our local capital dollars do not have to be listed because they're not in essence tax dollars. They were sales of property, but we have to reuse them for capital expenditures only.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes for advertisement. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to item E, our comprehensive student progression plan. And Mr. Lott, is he on? Is he on? Or
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. I apologize. I don't have my trusty blue book with me today, so I'm just guessing as to what you have, but we'll start with the CSPP. And for the most part, there were minor changes. We'll just scroll through the changes. The changes, if you look at the document, are in red, and then deletions or strike-throughs. So some clarification in VPK certificate. Ms. Clock added an enrollment to that. Dr. Hall had written an additional paragraph under students with disabilities in regard to equity access and support. We no longer call our school counselors guidance counselors. The state prefers us to call them school counselors instead of guidance counselors. So several times in the document, you'll see that guidance has been crossed out and school counselor has been added into the mix. If you go down to program of studies, there is some language that I added there in regard to the best standards, and just to give everybody a little bit of a timeline of anticipated adoption of the standards and what that might look like. And obviously, the plan, of course, we're in uncertain times, but the plan is that by 22-23, these best standards would be fully transitioned into by the state. On page 26, you'll see some other required instruction. The state keeps adding to this list, and so Ms. Jones took care of this section, and what she did is she just started making a list. What we had done previously is we had a list, but we had also had some explanations in regard to some of those things. If you look below her list, you can see she's actually struck those. The thought was that the state keeps adding these things, more and more elements of required instruction. If we keep explaining it, this document will be much larger than almost 80 pages as it is now. So if people want to know more about those particular elements, it's readily available online. So you see that a lot of the stuff there she's crossed out. Let's see. On the bottom of page 32, there's a clause, and you'll see this clause in several other places as well, just because it deals with student grades. This was a request on behalf of our principals, and basically what they wanted was to have grades. The lowest grade that a student would receive would be a 50. The way this reads, the teachers would put in whatever grade they feel like the student achieved. If that's a 20, they put in a 20. But Skyward will then change that based on district policy to a 50. Still an F. It's not going to change anything on a transcript or anything like that. The difference is that, like, given that student the 50, they then can possibly grade average the second semester and not totally fail the course. The scale, normal scale, is 10 points between the different grade levels. And so it made sense to them to have 10 points between the bottom of the F, the top of the F, more or less, instead of 60 or 59. On page 44, Ms. Jones added some stuff in regard to career and education planning, which has to be completed in grades 6, 7, or 8. This is a new requirement. Well, it used to be a requirement, and then they changed it, and now it's a requirement again. So she added that language in regard to career planning in middle school. That's a repeat of that grade language. And there's just some clarifying language on page 61, parental notification. There's a deletion there. I don't know why that was in there. I think we probably cut and pasted out of a board policy. It didn't need to be in here, so we cut that out. And looks like typo eligibility on page 78. And some clarifying language from Dr. Hall in regard to 504 students. And that is it. So, I know that's a lot. Do you have any questions?
Ashley, you have any questions first?
I have a couple.
Okay.
6 through 8, let me find it again. What all do we offer as far as career and technical that could count toward a high school credit?
I'm sorry, what page are you on?
44, it says parents of students in grades 6 through 8 will be required. I just didn't know what all we offered as far as career and technical classes.
For
I know we
example,
have ag and A.
for example, Ag Foundations counts as a high school class.
Right. I didn't know what we had in addition to that, if we have anything.
We have some business classes in middle school. Mostly it's ag and business.
And second question, I am strongly opposed to the grade being a 50. Just for the record, I don't know if that's something that we can discuss further, but I have a problem with someone doing their work, getting an 80, or it being late, and dropping it down to a failing grade, and yet you have someone that just puts their name on the paper and they automatically get a 50. I'm strongly opposed to that. That's all.
I think to clarify, also it's the final average, the lowest would be a 50, so if they put their name on paper and got a 0, the 0 would be in the grade book, but when the final averages for each 9 weeks, that's where the 50 would come in. So a kid's got a 23, their average is moved up to a 50, so that each increment is 10 points.
I'd like to address the board if I may. At Bronson Elementary, we've had this for many years. A student that turns in an assignment and he gets a 25. That's probably of several things that could be going on here. Either this student truly does not understand anything about what they're being asked to do, or they're totally unmotivated. Well, getting that 25, putting that in the grade book is not going to motivate that student in any way. But if I can't say to that student, you're 35 points from passing, and motivate them. But on that report card grade, if it's a 50, and I can sit down with that student and say, buddy, you got 10 points and you're passing, versus 35 points and you're passing. There's some hope there. There's light at the end of the tunnel. I've seen that make a huge difference for a lot of children. I've never explained that to a parent that they went, oh my gosh, let's beat your mom, my kid to get that 25. But I've had a lot of parents say, thank you for working with my kid. In every other scale, on our scale, is a 10-point range. An F is an F is an F, whether it's a 25 or it's a 50. But instead of allowing that lack of motivation to breed more failure, we need to find ways to motivate students. And that's a huge motivator. When I can say 10 points, buddy, and you're passing. Now, at my school, I don't allow zeros in the grade book. That student, we're going to find a time when that student's going to have to do that work. So I'm not going to have a student that just flat out refuses to do the work. You finish lunch, you come in my office, you sit in that desk over there, and that work's going to be finished before we do anything else. I don't allow zeros. But when that grade comes in during the 9 weeks, it goes in the grade book, whatever it was, whether it was 25, whether it was 32 or 48, it goes in just like that. But at the end of the 9 weeks, if it's below a 50, we bump it to a 50. And F's and F's and F. That's our thought process behind this. Averaging, when you average grades, it assumes that there are equal values between goal points. It is for every grade but an F. It's over 50% of that scale is failing. From 0 to 59 is failing. So over 50% of if it was a 50-point scale now, from 0 to 50, that'd be a lot fairer. But since that spread is not consistent, it makes it really hard for a student to dig out of that hole. But I can show a student and a parent how you can dig out of a 50 versus a 25.
Ms. Beecham, I agree with that and your philosophy, and I 100% agree with that with the elementary student.
Yeah.
And I think that's great, and I applaud you for that. I'm a little concerned, I'm not saying I'm against that, but I'm concerned as high school and, as work ethic and, just, someone just sitting and saying, I'm just going to get a 50 and, but I do believe an F is an F is an F. But it kind of bothers me, the work ethic issue, there, and they can just get a 30 and it can be bumped up. So that does concern me. And then I'm also a little concerned about, well, with teachers, how are they feeling? What are their opinions and how do they feel about giving them that 50? Because you're giving somebody a grade. How do you think they feel? And then thinking about the high school.
I've been doing this a long time.
Uh-huh.
NEFAC, 10 plus years probably. NEFAC come out with a training that I wrote to Bronson Elementary. Some of y'all may remember Deborah Massey with NEFAC. She wrote a training called Effective Grading Practices. There was questioning with my faculty at that point, but after the training and after talking through this and working through it for so long, everyone's on board now. You got to think to yourself, a 30 is failing and a 50 is failing. How failing do you want them to be? How far in that hole do you want them to be? The work ethic part, I try to address with not allowing zeros. You're not going to get out of that, but our grades are not to be punitive. We also think about that. They're not punitive. We're not using grades to discipline our children. We sometimes have to find a way to give them some hope. And in high school, middle school, and of course that's not my background, but I know that in that first semester, if they've got 25 average, there is no hope for them for the rest of that year. They're not going to pull it out. And so we're not here to fail children, but we're here to motivate them to do better, to success.
Right, and I can agree. I'd see them. And on the other side, they would think, well, I'm not going to go to school until the next semester, and we want to keep them in school. So I do see that side of it as well, too.
And it's relationship building. Like I say, I'll never explain that to a parent that was not appreciative of that.
May I say that we also, I attended that same training, and our staff actually, I was the last one to come on board. I had that exact same philosophy, but my staff actually talked me into, and we went over all these scenarios, just like Cheryl's saying, and we determined that was best for our students, that sort of policy. So Wilson Elementary has done that for years. That has been our policy.
I don't know, but would that save one kid from dropping out of school? A 50 versus a 25.
I'm all for on the elementary, especially, I love the no zero idea. It's the middle high, what Ms. Perkins said is what concerns me. I
can speak to what middle school looks like for me, and I realize that my middle school looks different than the bigger community schools. But I walked into Yankeetown, so this is already established practice there. So how we do it at Yankeetown is, how I do it is at lunchtime, I take a laptop and I have the kids that I know are starting to fall below. And so they're finished eating, come see me. They have to have a Skyward account. Pull up your Skyward account. Sometimes I'll bring 2 laptops. Explain this to me while you're missing something. Now you have to come to me, same thing. Because I explain to them, I'm not allowed to choose not to do something for my boss. You are not allowed to choose not to do that. But when we're looking at the 50s at the end of the way, at the end of the road for the 9 weeks, they're able to start to calculate, okay, so I've got 2 tests left, I need to make this, I need to make this, so they can start goal setting. And most of the kids that I'm talking about weren't taught work ethic, very young. They don't have a lot of role models that show them a lot of work ethic. And so this is all new for them. So what happens is they'll come flying in the door at lunch, I finished that, I turned it in, can I check to see if you graded it yet? Well, maybe you just turned it in, let's give him a few days, because it's been 10 minutes, he hadn't graded it from the walk over to lunch. But they're actively now involved in watching their grades. As much as we love them, we tell them, we want to hurry up and miss you. You have to, you know, you should be going on to big school. And so that does at least make them much more active. They're never going to, you know, the ones we're talking about aren't going to be our straight A. They're, you know, they're going to be our strugglers always. But at least now they have some accountability and some ownership and how they dig out. So that's just how we're seeing it.
Ms. Beecham, I appreciate you saying that, because my first opinion, and I have a child, we dealt with this, and I had his grade moved back to what he actually had, and it actually pushed him the other way. So I understand there's all different circumstances in that, but I appreciate what you said, because I probably changed my mind on the opinion, because I think a lot of times in education, what we do is we start measuring student to student and what's not fair. Your education, your child's education is their personal education. It's not compared. Once we get past salutatory and valedictorian, the competition between all that's over. So it's your own personal education. I know myself, sometimes we get looking at things as a whole, and you breaking that down with each individual student and talking about it is, I think, where we have to get our mind back to. So is it fair? I don't know, but does it matter at the end of the day? If we have 3 employees on 3 different schedules of pay, does it affect their performance? No.
Fair's not always equal.
Right.
Fair
So
is not equal in education.
everybody's talent levels are at a different level.
You get what you need. You get what you need, Mr. Etheridge. You get what you need, Ms. Ashley. You get what you need, Ms. Dressel. That's fair in education. You know, when you look at Fs, I got a 30 and you got a 50. I'm a bigger failure than you, or we both failed. You know, we got that. Every other spread in our grading scale is 10 points, except failing, except that F. Is that fair?
Ms. Brookins,
Yes.
Ms. Brookins, I want to call your attention to the top of page 32,
Okay.
and I want to look at this coin from a different side. And if you recall, we've had some discussions about how numbers and letters, how they correspond, and y'all adjusted the scale last year or year before last about what different letters and numbers mean and how they equate. Now, we have a very high transfer rate here in Levy County, kids coming into us, kids leaving us. And so what you see here is, and what I want to point out is kids that come to Levy County, and when a kid goes from county to county, what happens is they transfer, take numbers, and the numbers get transferred into letters, and the letters are what gets transferred. And then what you see here is the number conversion here. So what you have are kids coming to us from other districts out of state with an F, and the F is a 59. And so right now in Levy County, we're saying an F is a 50, which is lower than a 59. And so all we're asking to do is to make the playing field a little more leveler for our students. Because they're competing against these kids from out of county too for that Val and Sal and everything else.
Right. I understand. Yeah. Also, you know, you said you're already doing it at your schools and Willis and so on. So how many schools are already doing it? This with the 50 and below?
It's mostly the elementary schools, I think, doing it.
Crestwood was, Wilson Elementary was.
Wilson Middle High School is.
Are they?
So they're already doing this. It's already in effect.
They were last year.
So we're just putting it in our plan.
Here, my 2 cents are not worth 2 cents, but I will share my 2 cents. The number one thing about this that I am appreciative of hearing is it's consistent across the board by being here. If they're gonna do it in Bronson, I want them to do it in Yankeetown. If we're gonna do it in Williston, I want them to do it in Cheatham. Across the board, whatever is playing in one, we're playing in all of them. That's the first thing. The second thing, I am concerned about high school students. But what makes me say, okay, this is all right, is on here, it says there's a note. And I trust our educators, because here's the thing, I'm not an educator. And I don't think 50% is good enough. I don't think anybody in this room thinks 50% is good enough. But I like the fact that your kid's going to get a 50 on that report card, but there'll be a note saying, hey, look, this has been adjusted, and I want to talk to you. Because I believe we have several educators here. I've known this one longer than any of them. I guarantee you, Cheryl Beecham knows the difference in a kid that got a 50 because that got a 38. Let's go 38. Got 38 because he was trying his best and he just ain't got it. And that kid got a 38 because he don't care. I guarantee you, them teachers know and can have that conversation with that child because there's a difference in those two, and we all know that. That's the big thing for me. I think there are kids that strive really hard and they're gonna get that D or they're gonna get that C, and we need to celebrate that. And there are other kids that can pull an A, but they just ain't there. So I think having that note,
But
no, it's key.
conversation, the feedback is the power in it, absolutely, with both the student and the parent. And that's the power in the whole thing.
and it concerns me now because when you're about 16, you're fixing to get a job. If you go to work for the gathering table and your performance level is a 32, are you gonna say, oh, I love you, I want to motivate you, I'm gonna bump you a little, or are you gonna go, this ain't it? So that's where it concerns me in that high school.
I understand that. We have to keep in mind that these are still children in high school.
Well,
In high school, they're still children. And there's somebody, that's somebody's baby. That student is.
I can appreciate it. And that's why I say that note, being able to say, hey, this is you, you don't get it, or and we need to work on that, or hey, you got to motivate. There comes a point when you got to self-motivate. There comes a point when I can't hold your hand any longer. I will not give you a trophy because you played ball. I want you to win something. I want you to do something. So I think that note is the key cog in that wheel, and that will draw attention to, hey, we need to talk because Johnny ain't getting this, or Johnny ain't trying, one of two things. I think the note.
What we keep in mind is that 50 is the low end of the F. It could have been a 59. That's the high end. So there's your differentiation. The low end of the F is 50. Consider that 0.
I was gonna say a 50.
Is a 0. A 59 is the high end of that F.
And this doesn't, and it doesn't affect, like, say we take a test today and I get a 39. That grade goes in, and then it's at the end of the 9 weeks, it's whatever. And if I have a active adult in my life that sees my grades and reviews my Skyward, will talk to me and go, hey, what's the story? And then they'll call that teacher and go, we got to do something about this. Would you not assume that's the process that would happen normally?
I would, and I would assume that teachers are also being proactive on their end and making contact as well. That would be my expectation.
Or 50 being the end, especially knowing that the other stuff is going to go on.
I have a question on the plan other than that, but on page 20, Mr. Lotto, 27 and 28, I see where we've stricken veteran sacrifices, character education, and the Declaration of Independence. Oh, as that's under required instruction.
Yes, I think what Ms. Jones did is she put that under required instruction. That was already previously in there. But again, the state keeps adding this required instruction. And what we had done previously is we had put something in there and then kind of explained, a little more about what the requirement might look like. If we keep doing that, though, this document will be 200 pages long if we explained every one of the required instructions that run, like in 1003.43. So it wasn't deleted because it's no longer required instruction. It still is. It was deleted to be more consistent, and not explain every single one of those elements. I mean, if you don't want to strike it.
I understand what you're saying, Mr. Locke, but I mean, the career technical education's paragraph's longer than the Declaration of Independence. And I mean, I'm not here to argue. I just, in the world we're living in today, maybe some explanation of what we're actually doing in those areas. It's just a concern to me, just in the world we're living in, and those things of value to what I think Levy County is, to see that stricken just raises a flag for me, is all.
What I can share in the background that beyond this list right here, each school is required to, like, there's a standard for each grade level or more than one standard that matches up to this list by grade level. And each school has to report how, when, where, basically everything. how they're meeting everything on this list at each grade level. And that has to be reported to the district, and then the district has to combine that and submit to the state. So it may not be detailed here and just given as a list, but it's very detailed on our side and the teacher side of what they have to incorporate into their instruction during the years. I don't know if that helps. I just wanted you to understand that. If we,
But maybe so. I'm probably pushing, but I mean, we're going to strike that says each school day during the week, school principals and teachers are required to do the oral recitation of students and following the Declaration of Independence. So we're going to strike that, but over here it's going to say perform the Declaration of Independence or teach it. It's the first, it says Declaration of Independence. Now I look at that from an outside, it doesn't give me any direction other than that's required instruction. So it's one day a year during class, we have to teach the Declaration of Independence, or are we mandated every day that we recite the Declaration of Independence?
I think that's just that week.
It's 1 week.
It is.
I can tell you, we do not recite the preamble every day. We do the flag every day.
Okay.
But
Anyway,
that's
that
required
just-
instruction the last full week of September, every school year. Called Constitution Week. It's required instruction.
And even if we strike this language, you're telling me that that's going to happen 10 years from now. That even though we don't have this language written here, that's still going to be practiced in our county the last week of
August
September.
until 19.
Okay.
Well, that language, Mr. Etheridge, is in statute. So it's in the statute, exactly what those things mean and what they entail.
We also have to document that as instructors, all of those 19, we have to document what source we used, and it has to be documented also in lesson plan. So,
This is just kindergarten, as an example. The list that you see right there, this is just kindergarten and how what standard it's tied to, the specifics to, basically what's stricken here is described for kindergarten and when it's covered on the maps. So, and then there's a tab for every grade level.
Okay. I'm good now.
Are each one of them different links? That's just being nosy. Like Declaration of Independence got a week. Does Holocaust got a week? Is that how it works? Or is
not necessarily.
it just has to be hit on? So
Yes.
everyone else is different?
Yeah, some of them are specific, like Constitution Day.
Okay.
We just have to cover the unit.
Veterans Memorial Day, of course, those that designated times in the calendar. All of them have designated specific times.
I don't know if this document can have links in it. Is that something that's allowed? Like, if you included a link to the descriptors of each of these, I don't know if it's possibility.
That's what I would like to see included in our minutes and in our packets so that we can go in and look it up, because I don't want to glaze over this and not read it and not know and not go back and thoroughly research and make sure that we are teaching what it says and that it's in here, because I think that's what I agree with Mr. Etheridge in that, sometimes we don't, it may say something else and we're missing it or we're skipping it. And I want to make sure that we are looking at it and reading it and researching it thoroughly. And also, Mr. Lott, you made reference to page 26. I don't have page 26 and I don't have it in my book. And you said that there were other things in there. Does anyone have page 26?
It was page 27 in your book because the pages shift when the stuff is edited.
Oh, okay. So we have
nothing happened.
25 and 27 just got missed. Okay. But I mean, I went back and I read the standards and on the changes. And I mean, I think these are great and I want them included, but I think things get changed. And so, I mean, if we could have those links and they could be referenced and put in there, and like you said, you pulled up the kindergarten, that'd be great if we could, go and read it so that we know that's what we're voting on and make sure that actually is what we're voting on. And I know that, with the manual, it's a time issue right now with the beginning of school, and I know that's critical, but, I think more than ever right now with things that are happening, it's important. I don't want to miss it. I don't want to skip over it. I want to know what we're voting on.
One of the things I can suggest, we can report all this stuff to the state, and you can get that entire report if you would like to have that. But everything that you see here is something that's audited and required by the state.
Mr. Cowart, did you have any questions?
I echoed some of the same sentiments of the other board members going back to the grading levels, and I appreciate Ms. Beecham and Ms. Hurst kind of explaining things a little bit better, because when I first read that last week, that line about the grading gave me heartburn, and understanding now, because I know that it's been a practice in some of our schools, but having a little bit more consistency. So I appreciate that it's whatever works in one side of the county is also in the other side. So I'm appreciative of that. I've looked up the statutes and and I understand that we're trying to condense and make sure, but I think we're talking about things that are extremely important to our country's existence. And so I appreciate the comments of the other board members to make sure that we have the basis on what we're teaching to our students in there. Thank you, Ms. Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. Cowart.
I like the idea of a link. I like that. Laura, is there a website that it could be typed in there and say, okay, if you, mom and daddy, want to go look that up, go to this, and that tells what all these are? I think Ms. Lewis recommended a link. Something to be sitting on there. Not a tech guy.
Can I ask a question just for
Certainly.
simplicity? Is there a reason in the day and time, if this was probably 3 years ago, that stricken language probably wouldn't be as big of an issue right now in what's going on. But other than just, we think we're cleaning the document up, is there any other reason why we would be striking that language now?
No.
Okay, so I would amend it. I would move to amend it. Go ahead, I'm John. Sorry, John.
I didn't do that portion. That portion was by Ms. Jones. But we can unstrike that language in that section. The Declaration of Independence. What else would you like to unstrike? I think the character education needs to stay stricken, but the veteran sacrifices, we can add that back in there. Whatever you guys want to do.
I definitely think that Declaration of Independence and veteran sacrifices is important.
Yeah.
Sure.
So we need that form of motion. I move that we unstrike veteran sacrifices and the Declaration of Independence and leave it as written.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any more discussion with that? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes to unstrike those. Okay.
Is this the final day of the, does it require action today?
Yes, I think it does. Is that correct? It does require action for this plan today?
We would like to for you to approve it today. That's true.
Okay. I think with time, because we have to get them printed and off to get to school. Is there any other questions for Mr. Lott besides that about the plan?
The only thing I just want to say thank you, Ms. Beecham, Ms. Hurst, Ms. Lewis. I mean, you guys, I love having principals in our meetings because you guys can school us sometimes and say, and I think, I'm all for the elementary and middle school and hope and love. I worry about the high school level with that 50, there isn't that one-on-one. The teachers just can't. They can't get to all of those kids at Bronson and Williston and Chiefland. And I worry, especially with what happened this year with COVID, I worry, our motto is getting them ready for college and career success. I just don't know what that is teaching them at the high school level. I get 50 to 0, but just sometimes how they see it, I get a 50. At the high school level, I don't really agree to it.
Well, this was supported by every principal in our meeting. Every principal supported this clause. That clause came from another district. So to give you some idea about if we don't put something like this in there, our kids are at a disadvantage in regard to at the secondary level. They're a disadvantage in regard to getting credit. Those credits transition into graduation and diplomas. So the concern at the secondary level is that we are at an unfair disadvantage when it comes to those graduation rates.
If you're counseling with them, how to keep them alive until they can graduate, that, you know, if that 50's there somewhere back there, they feel like they may still be able to catch up and graduate. But I once knew a teacher who was kind of proud of being able to say, and you're out of here. So our view needs to be, we want to try to keep kids alive till they can find that motivation. And if you're counseling with someone, trying to get them to not quit, if there's hope for them still, then they tend to move on. You know, we might look at all of our teachers' transcripts and find that in college they had a B average, but their master's level work or their specialist level work was straight A. At some point they found the motivation they needed to succeed. We need, even at high school, we need to keep our kids alive, working toward that graduation. And at some point, maybe they will reach that deep motivation that they need in the process.
All the principals are for it, then who am I to?
It's a great question. It's a great discussion. Yeah, we had these same discussions with our faculties when we did this. But, you know, we're in the business of children and keeping them in school and trying to get them graduated. You know, what good is they dropped out with a 25 or they graduated with a 50? That kid that graduated is a lot more employable than that kid that dropped out with a 25. Now, what employment is going to be vastly different than that student that graduated with a B or an A or whatever. But our goal is to have them college and career success. Maybe that student's career is, you know, whatever job they can get, but at least they're working and they're productive. They're paying taxes and being a productive citizen if they have a job.
That gets
Versus a dropout.
Right, and that gets back to our need for more vocational classes.
Yes, ma'am.
For motivating those kind of
Yes,
children
ma'am.
that are in Levy County. Maybe they would be a little more motivated,
Yes,
a little more real world.
absolutely.
Do I hear a motion to approve our student progression plan?
So
So moved.
I have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Lott. We'll move on to item F, our Williston land. Mr. Lott.
Many of you know, for many, many years since the stadium at Williston High School was built, the McCoy family owns adjacent property, and they have allowed the school to use it for parking for football games. In return, the school board kept the area mowed for them. Recently, the McCoy family has begun to divide up some of that property. It has it on the market. When I discovered that and realized that we also had some funds that came from the sale of the Williston Middle School that could possibly help us, I started doing a little research and inquiring about whether or not the portion that's closest to the football field, which is it's a parcel of 4.2 acres, whether or not that would be sale or not. And was able to work out, a potential cost of $149,100, which is less than what's being charged on the individual lots that are for sale that they have adjacent to. What I would ask the board is your approval in concept to the purchase of this land, because if we don't purchase it now and eventually it becomes houses, there will be nowhere for the parking for patrons and supporters to park for Williston events at the school stadium. So I would ask for the board to approve in concept the purchase of this property. Mr. Edison then can sign the contract, which would put a binder on the property. We would then advertise this publicly for 30 days, and that would allow for public comment to take place. And then it would come back to the board for final approval in September.
Might I add, what essentially all you're doing is allowing me to enter into the contract, but it will come back to the board to approve. And it binds this property right now. And we also have to have it surveyed. We also have to have an appraisal within those 30 days.
I just wanted to be real clear too. This is coming from capital dollars that are specific for this type of expenditure and earmarked for Williston area. This is not impacting the general fund at all.
Madam Chair, I move that we give the superintendent authority to enter into contract on the McCoy property, item F.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion?
I think John, he broke up, so I don't know if John Lott said it or not. Is that about the going rate for land over there?
Well, as I said, that's a pretty good discount based upon what we're charging for the single acre lots, which are right adjacent to it. A total of 8.2 acres there. 4 of those acres have been divided into 1 acre lot, and they are going for $39,000.
Mr. Asbell, what has to happen is we have to have an appraisal done, and based upon that appraisal, where this land falls into it, depends upon how the board, what type of majority the board has to do to approve this project, whether it's a simple majority or a super majority, and that's based upon the appraisal, and that's per statute.
But yes, there's some developments going on right now in Williston at that level or higher.
Thank you. We do have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Lott.
Can I add one more thing? Another project that the board has already previously approved, we have resurfacing that, is the covered playground for Williston Elementary School. That is on our 5-year work plan, and just so you're in the loop, we were trying to get up-to-date bids. If you remember, this came back to the board in 2017. We got bids. The money was not there at the time to complete the project. We're hoping now that we will have the funds to complete that project that the board has already approved and it's on the 5-year work plan. I'll have those bids when they come in. This has to be a sealed bid process because of the amount that we're talking about. And then we'll present those to the board when those come in for your approval to move forward on that as well.
Okay. I understood about 75% of that.
Yeah, that's really muffled. It's really hard. I didn't really clearly understand that one
So
either.
the playground at Williston Elementary School that's paved the covering that we've been talking about for about the past 12 or 14 years to cover that. The remaining sale of the Williston Middle High School funds to go ahead and cover that facility.
Well, if we're talking all this
Thank
stuff
you.
right now, I'd like to go ahead and throw out what we sold Bronson Middle High School a couple of years ago. And I'd sure like a covered playground at Bronson Elementary School that was talked about at the same time.
For 10+ years.
We have talked about to the point to where little youngins are turning red and falling out there without a tree to get under. I'd like to see that visited too. I'm for buying all this stuff, but let's do it. Or let me do it like Mr. Lott did.
Okay, good comments there.
Thank you, Mr. Adler.
You're welcome.
So, Mr. Lott, that is the, you need a motion to advertise that in school board policy for the safety. Is that the request we just went over?
Yes, ma'am. This is some new requirements by statute. Basically they've added some additional requirements from the superintendent and school principals in regard to SISR, which is our safety incident reporting system.
Does anyone have any questions about this, the 8.01 policy?
Who fills out the SISR?
Currently, it has to be certified by the school. They have to certify that everything is correct. It is a major undertaking in the MIS department to make sure things are coded correctly. We have to undergo training each year to make sure people understand what the definitions are and how to do it. Well, some of them are not logical, but it is what it is. And then I have to go off and certify that the data is correct.
Where does our coordinator of safe schools come into that?
They're a part of the whole process and working with the schools and the SISR data and everything else. But it's, the coordinator of safe school really gets involved in those incidents that are reported to law enforcement.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do I hear a motion to approve?
I move to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes to advertise the school board policy. Thank you, Mr. Lott. Item H, the approval of the minutes of the July 6th board workshop and the July 14th board meeting. Are there any changes?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Madam Chair, this is Angela. I did not get those minutes finished in time to submit for your review, so I will have them at the August 3rd meeting.
Okay, so we're not going to approve either one of those?
No, ma'am. They will be postponed to the August 3rd meeting.
Thank you very much.
That's very good. A point of order. Did we ever vote on the Williston acquisition? I know I moved and there was a second, but did we vote?
Yes, we did.
Okay.
Yes, we did. And then he was talking about
We got to talk about
the
playground
playground.
covers, then we moved
We
into
voted and then
Right, he
That's
came
fine.
back and was talking about that, so yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay, so we're gonna postpone the minutes. Consent agenda, are there any changes on the consent agenda? Okay, now, I'll start with Mr.
ma'am.
Coward. Okay, Mr. Coward, do you have any questions on the consent agenda?
No, ma'am. So all my questions have been answered. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Etheridge?
Just one, and hopefully we're still, I'm gonna do it, Mr. Turner, following those exit interviews with our employees that are leaving us, but we hired one February of 2020, and I think COVID started about March 20 of 2020. And they left us for Gilchrist County School Board on June 1. And there may be some circumstances, but just reading into it, probably actually physically worked for us for a month.
And resign through email.
Okay, I just, for us, and this will be Mr. Turner, I won't carry on tradition. I don't know if there's a list somewhere, but if there's a day that that employee ever comes back to Levy County, that needs to be remembered how and what they did during a time that it's pretty unnecessary. So I just want to make that on the record.
And we can pull that up and look at that.
That was just a note. If in a normal year, I know things happen, and I know it could be health reasons or a lot of other things, so I don't want to go into it, but if there was an exit interview done, but if they resigned by email, I can understand. Madam Chairman, that would be, I'd never pass the opportunity to do those resignations in that way. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Etheridge. Ms. Kaminsky? Okay. Mr. Aswell?
Nothing for me.
All right. And I think all my questions have been answered as well. Thank you very much. Do I hear a motion to approve our consent agenda?
So moved.
A motion and a second. Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes to approve our consent agenda. Mr. Edison?
Yes, ma'am. Just want to let you know that we are extremely busy right now trying to get our schools open. And in a part of this, as you know, in past board meetings, we talked about the Canvas training. Well, the Canvas training just started yesterday. And but we also have the new standards training going on today as well. I say all this in that there's a lot of moving parts that are happening at the same time. And in conversations with our people, it's very, very, very important that we get all this stuff rolled out. Again, we're dealing with educational options right now that did not exist 3 weeks ago. And so there's going to be a greater need to do some teacher professional development and help the teachers get comfortable with the Canvas training and some of the other curriculum items that they're having to learn. And right now, I don't know how to do what I'm fixing to say, but we are investigating the possibility of pushing back the start date of school by 1 week to allow these teachers and personnel to get the training that they need to do to make the implementation of our school year and all the different options that we're going to be requiring of the people to do, the teachers, so that we can have a successful rollout. Right now, I just don't have a plan, but be prepared for us to call an emergency board meeting to discuss this, and it's an agenda item. That's it, Ms. Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for that update. And that is
That might be wise.
yes, that's right, and that is a concern, and certainly we're all getting hit with that, and I know everyone is. So
this goes everywhere from what goes on in the classroom to them getting a check. And so we need to make sure that, I know people haven't been paid for 2.5 months, but we don't want to interrupt payroll either. And so we want to be able to make things happen. So we have to do it the right way, and it's very complicated.
right,
Ms. Brookins?
yes,
So Mr. Edison, I know in speaking yesterday, and I know you began the process of looking through this. If we extend or push back a week, what does that look like with classroom minutes or instructional time, days built into our schedule, those type of things?
Well, right now, we've had one conversation that happened yesterday afternoon. We haven't had a chance to sit there and dive into instructional minutes and how many days we can not make up or not, because we just don't know yet. So we're looking at what options are on the table to make this happen. And just right now, I can't give you an answer because I just don't know.
Gotcha.
Different schools have different things, and what generally catches us on instructional minutes is grade 4 and 5. And it's because that's for your elementary schools, where your requirement for kindergarten through 3 are different than your grade 4 and 5. You go from 720 instructional hours to 900 instructional hours. And so you miss a day and you can all of a sudden you're out of compliance with your 4th and 5th grade. And that's the area that you got to watch the most.
Gotcha. Would there be a possibility of days that are built into our calendar for school improvement or PD days where we could front load those?
Yeah, that's what you and I that was our conversation on the phone. And that is something we'll look at. And of course, anything that we do is subject to negotiation. We have to talk to the union.
Correct.
Because it's a change in what we've done.
Will that be just as simple as an MOU?
Don't know. I don't know, Mr. Cowart. We have not had a conversation with them yet.
Gotcha. And then my other question for you is I've had some employees that have reached out about asking us about whether testing employees before they came back to work to have a negative test.
Well, I don't know that we can get into the personal realm of requiring a test for somebody before they can come in. I just don't know that we have that right. Maybe the counselor can enlighten us on that, but I don't know that we can make that requirement. If we're a private business, we probably could.
And I will say that a lot of the school districts are facing the same problem and having the same questions. That's something I can look into, and I'll let the board members and citizens know.
Who was that?
That's the lawyer.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you.
Passion Mickens, yes, you can.
But because we take a negative test today does not mean we're not positive tomorrow. So
That's right.
I mean, we're not clean forever, so let's don't get off.
And can I say that I know that Kaylee, we looked over a document that we're going to have every employee sign before they come back that states that they are taking their temperature daily. They are using these certain precautions before they come to work, and there's going to be a document that they're going to sign. So we looked over a second document yesterday, but I do know that she's already got a plan for that.
Have we updated our frequently asked questions to maybe include that so parents might see that we're putting those safety precautions in?
It will be updated. We posted that as a live document so that we can make any additions as we decide to.
Madam Chairman, so I want to make sure, Mr. Edison, because we just lumped two things in one conversation. That's extending school for a week, and then we went to talking about testing other. The reason we would extend school for another week is because we need more time to prepare through our new platform. It is not that we think the COVID is going to be gone in a week. Okay, I just want to make sure that we just lump those two conversations together, and I don't want to make
That is correct, Mr. Crawford.
Thank you.
But then we can prepare for options 2 and 3.
We have a successful start to the school year.
With the new platform of Canvas. And we're trying to identify teachers that were going to do that. And we haven't, we just got started trying to look at numbers.
Right, we've got a response from 70% of our families. So administrators are trying to make decisions based on not all the answers.
Do you guys think a week's enough? It's a week. Can you get it done in a week, you think, or?
It's going to be tough,
Yeah.
but I'm afraid of how are we going to find instructional minutes if we push any further. And at some point, we got to start.
Right.
So
And it's not-
a week would be a great help, a gracious.
It's not a week either. If we were going to start on the 10th, that's 20 days from now, right? And then extend another week would give us 27 days from now to prepare instead of 20. I mean, well, we keep saying a week, but it's not, we're not starting next week, so.
It's an additional.
Right, an additional week.
Right.
Yeah, I was trying to do that math there in 7 days. It's still a week.
But see, right now, Canvas training is going on for the teachers, the 2 or 3 teachers we identified to go to the training. And then they're going to come back next week and spend 2 days training the rest of our faculty.
You're training the trainers.
We're training the
Okay.
trainers this week, and next week they'll train our faculties at our respective schools. And then the next week, school start, pre-planning. So that is a very short turnaround to do the things that they need to do just to start school traditionally. And then throw in preparing to do blended and virtual teaching on top of that.
Well, I think that week is desperately needed.
Me too.
Miss Lake,
Yeah.
Miss Lake,
Yeah.
if let's say we didn't have the instructional time flexibility, and so we've got to cover the costs of the 5 days, what kind of figures will we be looking at?
We'd be looking at roughly $95,000 a day just for instructional, not including bus, not including food, not including aids, and that would include benefits. Our superintendent is trying to do it revenue neutral because that is such a burden to extend the contract by 5 days. Facing a budget that's highly volatile.
Thank you, Ms. Lake.
Thank you. Any other comments, Mr. Edison?
No, ma'am. Just a lot of work to do right now.
Thank you very much. We'll start with board comments. I'll start with Mr. Aspel.
It's only been a week since I threw all my thunder out. I really don't have anything.
Okay.
I just want to say thank you. I mean, I think we're in a catch-22 with the instructional minutes versus the week that's desperately needed, and we're all just trying to figure it out and staying positive, and it's just a very fluid situation, so.
All right. Mr. Rutherford.
I just want to say thank you for everybody for the work that's being put in, and someone talked about essential workers the other day, and there was a list of those that came out when all this COVID came about, and I think what Pete realized is probably at the top of that very list needs to be teachers, because the education of our kids in our country, and it was a time where we stopped school, but I sure hope teachers understand their importance and the role that they play in the sanity of people's homes and the part, so all that said and done, I appreciate the work that everybody's doing behind the scenes. And Ms. Lake just said on something that I figured out about 2 years ago, and I think we miss sometimes, but it costs $100,000 a day to educate our kids in Levy County. So every one of these moves are strategic. I understand safety, health is most important, but we have to weigh all of this out as board members and as employees and superintendents, and they're hard and tough decisions. And like a man told me one time, he said, not everybody likes you. I understand that, because when you make decisions like this, there's going to be people that don't like those decisions. That's just part of being here.
Well said. Mr. Cowart.
I just echo all of the sentiments from my fellow board members about all the efforts. Appreciate Ms. Beecham, Ms. Hurst, and Ms. Lewis, who have been right there in the trenches and kind of gave some valuable feedback to us today. So really appreciate that. And the only other thing that I had, because we kind of touched on them and some of the questions in the superintendent's comments, is making sure that our videos are uploaded. We seem to be running a little bit farther behind our June 23rd meeting, and because last week I had several people that were messaging that they were trying to access our live stream, which it says it's for the public, and I guess because they didn't have a Levy Google address, they weren't able to access that. So just making sure that we can get that information to our parents to assure them of their fears and just let them know all the hard work that's going on. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cowart. The only comments I have is I really do appreciate what Ashley said. We need our principals here. We need that feedback and comments, and I think it's great. It does help us, and I want everyone back at our board meeting. It really helps, and we can understand and hear better, and we want Mr. Edison back so we can see expressions and face, and Mr. Cowart. So Mr. Lott, we can understand him better, and we just would be so happy when everyone can get back at our board meetings, and it'll be great. But thank you very much, and we'll look forward to hearing from Mr. Edison on our emergency board meeting and whatever we need to do to help him get prepared for that. If that's all, thank you very much. Meeting adjourned.